Complicated mold process made easy using DragonSkin 10NV and Moldstar 31T platinum silicone rubber. Now, in today's two-part video tutorial, we're first going to show you how to create a mold of wooden carvings, and then in the second half of the tutorial, we'll show you how to cast resin to make it look like original wood carvings. Now, this project here, I received some figurines that are of local mythology from Paraguay, and I took really liking to some of them because they are quite interesting. A 7-headed dog and a dog or wolf figurine, and I wanted to recreate them to share them around the office. Now we're going to show you a couple different molds here that we made, but most importantly we did set a couple project goals for this project. We're going to show you how to create a high detail mold from the original wood carving model. We're going to also determine the implementation of mold design and the material choices that are appropriate for different models. We're going to use soft silicones for the more difficult pieces. We're also going to show you how to solve issues of pass-throughs on difficult models and create a gang mold with less complicated pieces or the figurines so that we can easily cast multiple parts in one go. So let's just jump into this project and see how it's done. Now for this project, we're going to be using the DragonSkin 10NV. The reason for this specific material choice today is the fact that I'm looking for very stretchable mold making material, low viscosity, and can degas on its own. So the NV stands for no vacuum required. Now this is a 1:1 mix ratio by volume. That is a 10A durometer shore hardness. It has a working time of 15 minutes, while a full cure takes place in 75 minutes. Now, if you take a look at the FAQ section on molding, there is actually a section about making molds of wooden objects, and that certain woods can inhibit the cure of certain silicones. So it's really important to understand that and do the necessary small-scale test to understand if the molding material is compatible with our model. So I mixed up a little bit of the DragonSkin because that's what I'm going to be making the mold out of for these two figurines here. And I'm pretty much applying it to the wood directly. I want to see if there's going to be inhibition. And after a full cure, you can see here that the silicone has cured with no tackiness to it. And I know that the material will cure up against the wood that this is made out of. Now, figurine like this that has open passages between the legs in multiple directions will have to be dealt with so that the silicone doesn't entrap the figurine and we have to cut it open. There's more than one way to deal with a challenge like this, but today I'm going to show you how you can use these things called bubble sheets that are made for mold making such objects and basically have keys already created into the plastic sheet. And these keys basically help the two halves of the mold align perfectly and find their place so that the seam line around the two edges is very minimal and requires very minimal cleanup. Now I'm going to show you how you can use these bubble sheets to work areas like these open spaces. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of that bubble sheet and then trace the outline of the area that I'm trying to fill. And you can see how I saved that key in the middle. I cut the plastic to the shape, and once the shim is cut to size, I'm going to test fit it several times and make adjustments to make sure that the shim fits into the place that it's intended for and is held firmly by the model in that place. So it should be just big enough to cover the area and be held in place by pushing against the model in several spots, but not so it will buckle the shim itself and deform it, but just enough so it's held in place and won't dislodge if it's bumped easily. It is not necessary that the shim that we're creating touches the model 100% all the way around. You want several spots to be touching the model, and if there are some spots like here that are actually passages through, that's okay. That's a very small area, and when we demold the original from the mold, that area will be easy to either cut with a razor blade or simply rip by pulling on the mold itself to remove the original model and the shim. Once the shims have been inserted, we can go ahead and put a mold box around the model. I'm going to give myself about 1/2 inch of space between the model and the mold box, which will then determine the thickness of the mold once it's finished. The key is to make the mold walls thin enough so they're flexible and stretchable so we can easily demold our casting, but not too thin so that it would deform the casting when we cast the resin into the mold. Now, as always, before dispensing any of these materials, you want to make sure you pre-mix them thoroughly. Scrape the bottom of your container, mix it thoroughly, and incorporate anything that might have separated in the time that material has been sitting on the shelf. Now again, 1-to-1 easy mix ratio by volume. We can go ahead and mix the two components together, and then as always mix thoroughly by scraping the sides and then scrape the bottom of your mixing container. Make sure to combine those two very well together. Now everything is transferred into a secondary clean mixing container, and the whole step is repeated. A double mix procedure is a good idea for translucent materials because you don't have a positive mix indicator like you would in some of the other silicone products that are colored. Once the material is mixed, we can go ahead and pour it into the mold box. You can see in a thin stream, this is allowing us to pop any bubbles that are still trapped in the material. And once this is topped, we're going to allow the material 75 minutes to cure before proceeding on to the next step. Now that the material has cured, we can go ahead and demold. And once we have the mold box apart, we can demold the original sculpture, and keep in mind that the shims that we inserted into the sculpture prevented the silicone from encapsulating and locking the model in the silicone. And those tiny spots where the silicone did flow through now easily break away, as you can see. By pushing the model out of the soft silicone, we're able to actually free those shims. So the shims allowed the model to be extracted from the mold because they have prevented the silicone from flowing freely through the model's legs completely. Now, the same procedure and more importantly, the same material is going to be used to make this block mold for this little figurine. It is identified as a little bit of a difficult piece to demold, and therefore I will be using the softer silicone, but it doesn't have any pass-throughs. There's no legs freestanding here, so we don't have to worry about using any bubble sheets for this. The Dragonskin 10NV is poured and allowed a full cure for 75 minutes. Once the material is cured, we can remove the original sculpture by flexing the mold and pushing from the back. And here it just simply pops out of the mold. The rest of the figurines don't pose as much of a molding challenge as the first two did. Now, after some studying of the figurines themselves, I decided that it will be easiest to make a two-part gang mold, so all the figurines in one mold. This type of mold application will save you time, money, as far as material costs and as far as production costs. Once you have a gang mold like this, it's going to be a lot faster and easier to multiply and reproduce the castings that you intend to. Now, you have to be very strategic and understand how the mold is going to come apart to make sure that all the pieces will cast and demold the way you intend them to. So a lot of thought and prep goes into the setup of a gang mold like this. We want to make absolutely sure that the castings and the mold will come out the way we intend them to. I started out by laying out some of the Sculptex oil-based clay on a working surface. This is the soft version. It's a utility clay I use. And then I carved the shapes off the figurines into the clay. Remember, we're going to make a two-part mold, and for that I'm going to sink the figurines halfway into the clay. Any of the tools and objects that the figurines are holding in the hands will be removed for the molding process. I can simply start laying them in, and then I'm going to build up some of that clay right around the figurines themselves to close that gap between the figurine and clay. And you can see here that some of that has to be built up about 1/2 inch, and then I clean the edges, making them as crisp and clean as possible. And I'm going to continue doing this for all the figurines. So set them in. Build up the mold line, separation line where I need to, so around the arms here, the arm there, the head here and there. And then I'm going to proceed to build up the what's going to become the pour spouts basically for every figurine here. And do note, while the pour spout is all one connected piece, the individual figurines have a funnel-shaped area right below them, which indicates me how much material to pour into each individual area without creating an entire casting of a pour spout. From our mold design, I understand that these figurines will be casted upside down, and some of the arms that are sticking out from the body will trap air bubbles in them. So to prevent this from happening, we will install some air vents that connect those freestanding arms to the top of the base and allow the air to move through the casting. Here are some more air vents that are added. And you can see in the graphic here how that will work out. So as we pour the material into the mold, that arm will trap an air bubble. By adding an air vent there, we allow the air bubble to move up and get a good solid casting every time we use that mold. To learn more about the air vents, please follow the link to our YouTube live presentation that we did on pour spouts, air vents, and keys for successful mold making and casting. Here I'm using what is known as a caulking tool to create keys in the first build-up of my two-part mold. While I'm not using the tool for what it's initially intended for, it works very well to create keys in Sculptex soft clay, and they're available in different sizes. And here is the result of that. You can see the keys all around the models. And now I'm pretty much ready to put a mold box around this and get the material ready to be poured. Now, the material that I decided to use for the two-part block mold of this project is the Moldstar 31T. And there are several reasons why I chose this product. First of all, it's a fast-setting material with a work time of 5 minutes and a cure time of 23 minutes. Of course, it's very easy to use with a convenient mix ratio of 1:1 by volume or weight. And also, an important aspect of the product is the durometer, the hardness of the material. So I don't need the stretchiness of the dragon skin like in the first half of our mold making process here, but we rather need a firmer rubber, and the Moldstar 31T has a 30A durometer and will lend itself very well for a two-part block mold. By using a firmer rubber like the Moldstar 31T, we need to apply less pressure to hold the mold halves together. So the stiffer rubber doesn't deform under the pressure and holds the shape, which in turn produces models that are not deformed. You want to make sure that you pre-mix it before you start dispensing. So part A and part B do get a pre-mix, a thorough pre-mix by scraping the bottom and scraping the sides off the container. And once we have the material measured out, again 1:1 by volume, we can go ahead and combine it in a clean mixing container. Keep in mind the working time is 5 minutes and a full cure is 23 minutes. So we have to work fast but thoroughly. So once we combined and mix the two components, we're gonna mix thoroughly by scraping the sides and scraping the bottom. So once again, transferring everything to a clean mixing container. The double mix technique is an easy way to ensure a thorough mix between the different components, since we don't have a color indicator in the silicone. And then once we got that mixed up, we can go ahead and pour the material into the mold box. Keep in mind the short working time, so don't delay. Make sure you mix and pour very fast. Now we can allow the Moldstar 31 to cure for 23 minutes. Now, once the material is cured, we can go ahead and start to take that mold box apart. And we can slowly peel away the Sculptex oil-based clay. Any of the residue is now easily cleaned. And then we're going to reset that pour spout on the other side. A little bit of cleaning around the models. And then we can reassemble that mold box once again around our already existing first half of the mold. Now we do need to put some release agent on the first half of the silicone mold. This is Ease Release 205. It's the liquid version of the Ease Release 200. And because we are using a liquid release agent, you have much better control over coverage and where you're applying the release agent than you would have using an aerosol can. When using liquid release agents like this, make sure not to over apply and allow the material for pooling in lower points of the mold. Now the release agent is allowed to dry for 15 minutes. Make sure that all release agent has evaporated. And in the meantime, now we can go ahead and mix up our Moldstar 31T for the second half of the mold, just like we did in the first half. Make sure you scrape the sides, scrape the bottom of your mixing container, and then do a double mix, because there's no color indicator to tell you when you mix thoroughly. And again, this is a fast setting material, so make sure that you don't delay. Pour the material into the mold box and allow it to cure for 23 minutes. Once the Moldstar has cured, we can go ahead and demold from the original mold box. I'm going to trim some of the silicone away as well, the meniscus. And then we're going to pry our mold slowly open, removing the pour spout. This is Sculptex-based clay that we use for the pour spout area. And then we're going to slowly remove the wood figurines out of the mold, as well as any of the dowels and toothpicks that we used for the air vents. The mold can now be put back together using a couple of blocks of wood. These are melamine boards actually that I cut to size. And then just by simply using an elastic band here, is going to give us enough pressure to put on that mold to keep it together firmly. Now, if you got inspired by our project and you need some material to give your own projects a go, you can visit any one of our distributors around the world. So, and there you have it, a step-by-step procedure that I use to create molds of these wooden figurines so that we can reproduce them and keep the original detail of the wood grain. Now, let's just take a quick look at our project goals. We showed you how to create high detail molds of original wood carvings. We also determined and implemented the mold design and material choices that are appropriate for different models, as well as used softer silicone for the more difficult pieces, as well as solved the issue of pass-throughs. And we created a gang mold with the less complicated figurines to easily cast multiple parts at one time. Now keep in mind that this is a one part of a two-part video tutorial. So if you want to check out the castings coming out of this mold, make sure you follow the link above for that. Now if you have an idea about what we should do next, please let us know down in the comments below. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up button. To keep up with our latest mold making, casting, and other videos, remember to subscribe.